certainly. Can you hear me now? Is this a comfortable tone? Too loud? Too soft? This is how I would normally speak. So this is the level, the tone. I can get a little louder, so I will try not to do that. It's my pleasure. Those are some nice shiny shoes you got there, buddy.
Now my man, it's not working now.
Did you turn it on?
Too loud.
Yeah, it's a little loud.
This is not church, you know, y'all.
So, can you hear me? Probably should have worn paint. Is this a hot mic? It's a hot mic.
I don't think I'm showing up. You can't hear me? Can you hear me?
No, I was just trying not to say anything on mic that shouldn't be heard in the audience.
You know, all I know is you talking about Jack the last time.
First of all, where is Jewel? Jewel, you need to stay off the internet. You need to stay off the internet. You try to get me in trouble.
Jewel is a fool.
This had nothing to do with this. This is about wealth building, not about me not doing laundry.
All we walked away was that Stephanie don't do laundry.
That's what everybody heard.
Hello.
I mean,
Right,
Jack, that had nothing to do with wealth building.
That is hilarious.
Let's not and say we did.
That is funny.
All right, so this is it's a little loud. My mic sounds loud. I don't think I need a mic, frankly.
I don't know how to answer that. I feel like if I agree with you, I feel like that's
It
wrong.
does? Yes. It's not bad? Okay. Take it down any less, then we may not hear you better. Very good. Thank you for that feedback. That's a nice jacket.
But can you hear me as well? Okay, so since you didn't respond, I'm taking you can't hear me very well.
And I'm loud.
Okay. All right.
I don't like hearing my own voice.
Exactly.
See, I like the little more intimate crowd. We're gonna have fun tonight.
I don't know. I kind of feel crazy. I'm like, y'all add me to the panel and the attendance go down. Like, I don't know.
I wasn't going to say that, but.
Gotta get my brand up.
I know we had a full house last time. Brandon shows up.
Exactly. Well, I
Like,
told them.
dang. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it'd be fine.
I probably should wear pants.
Hello, miss. How you doing?
See, she wore appropriate attire.
I'm sorry, how you say your name again?
Naima. He's my arch rival.
Isaiah.
We are arch rivals. Yes.
Except I like him too much.
I know me
Really
too.
a problem.
The friendliest rivals ever. Everybody needs a little good competition around here, right? Zaya. Yeah, I didn't even get to see Isaiah. Jerry Saunders. Jerry is if you don't know Jerry Saunders, you don't know anybody.
The man, the myth,
He
the
is
legend.
the man, the myth, the legend.
The legend. Already.
And Joel, the troublemaker. Joel, the troublemaker.
I told him when I spoke to him.
Okay. Oh, he's doing a mic check. Oh.
I'm assuming we should turn out.
No, I'm done.
Can we turn our mics off, or do we just have to stay quiet the whole time?
Where my guy at? Good evening, good evening. Let's take a couple more minutes and finish up our conversations, please. 2 minutes, finish up our conversations. Thank you. Testing 1, 2, 3, yeah. All right, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. All right, let's get started. Let's get started, folks. If everybody will take their seats. Thank you so much. I love the energy that's in the house. I love it. All right. Good evening. I'm Jerry Saunders, and I have the pleasure to serve as the chairman of the board of directors for the Equity Now Coalition. And I want to thank the Columbus Urban League and the Equity Now Coalition for making this happen and bringing it together. And our Madam President and Chair, CEO, will give thanks to our sponsors as we go on a little further this evening, so I'll save that for a little later on. I'm going to start off and just tell you a little bit about ENC. Most of you, as I look around, probably already know about it, but we started this back as a result of COVID. And at that time, we had the PPP, where the government was passing out money to organizations, and a lot of the African-American organizations in our community were concerned that they would not receive those dollars. So Madam President, CEO Stephanie Hightower had got together and said, let's get some of the African-American leadership together, get some community engagement so that we can address that issue. And that did occur. Her and Christy Angel got together, called a bunch of us together, and we dealt with that, and it was very successful, where people were able to receive that PPP money. As a result, we thought, well, let's not stop here. We're going to keep going and say we decided that we would address systemic racism that was going on in Franklin County. And that's what we have been doing since the inception. And so some folks don't know, but every other Thursday we have calls. We're online, and we have calls with a number of the leaders in the community to address issues that have been going on other than just COVID. And so we're looking at moving forward, put a strategic plan together to address major issues in our community, basically dealing with it from the generational wealth, the wealth gap. And so that's one of the reasons that we are here this evening to talk about that, because it's equity now. And I'll tell you a quick story. We just decided if we all got together, got all the folks that are on the calls, on committees, and addressing the issues from workforce development to education and economics. Now, all those seem like broad topics, but we're breaking them down so that we can address each one of them to build on it. And this is something long-term, nothing short. To give you an idea about this, a story that just broke just recently this past year out in California, Manhattan Beach, California. There was a family, the Bruce family, that bought some property at Manhattan Beach in 1920 for $1,225. Now, it was beachfront property. So on one side, it was, at that time in the 20s, white folks only. On the other side, white folks only. And in the middle here was for African Americans, for blacks. But it was prime real estate. So the folks wanted it. On both sides wanted that real estate. Ku Klux Klan came in and tried to take it. Black folks wouldn't leave. They stayed strong. So they went with this systemic racism and did eminent domain and took that property in the late 20s from them. But understand, they got the property back this past July 2022, where the city gave it back to them officially. They got that property back and gave it to the grandsons. So when we talk about generational wealth, that's a prime example of they had that wealth way back then and just now getting it now. Now I think about it and I go, the folks who got it now, grandparents must have been, like I'm older, so my parents used to say, it just takes time. Time is coming, it'll take time. So their grandparents probably say, in all due time. Then their parents said, in all due time. And then they said, now. Tired of waiting? It's now. So we equity now, dealing with these systemic systems. We're not waiting any longer. We're not asking anybody else to do it. It's on us to do this. And we're talking about generational wealth, teaching our young folks. And so I know when I came up, we didn't talk about that. We didn't even know we were poor. I mean, we just enjoyed life. Everything seemed to be there. But we got to teach our young folks about interest and all of that. So those young folks there today, they leased that land to the city of Manhattan Beach. Now, do you understand leasing land, what that does? That means you just got the land there and you collecting a check every year. Your children gonna collect a check, their children gonna collect a check, and their children gonna collect a check. Now that's generational wealth. And we need to understand those things and teach those things. Now I'll get carried away, Stephanie, so let me just slow down, get back on point. Excuse me. But I just get excited about it because I see it happening now because it's older folks, younger folks, in between everybody. Look at the folks in the audience here. So we got everybody working on this, and we just got to do it because what we're talking about is a community mindset. Individually, yes, we rolling. But we like 15th largest city. We need to be rolling as a city in this country, collectively talking about economic development. And it's going to take some time, but that's what we're doing. That's what this is all about, and you'll see this evening. So I'll move on, and I know Stephanie's going to do some thank yous, but I am going to say, oh, she said no, so I'm going to thank the Museum of Art. Thank him for letting hosting this here, and J.P. Morgan. Thank you, guys. All right. Thank you, guys. J.P. Morgan Chase so much. We want to thank you guys. And then we want to thank our man here, Jewel Woods. He's our moderator. And he's been doing it a couple times and doing an excellent job doing that. So we want to bring Jewel Woods. He is the founder and the owner of Male Behavior Health. And so we're going to bring him on up, and he can handle it from here and take care of it. Thank you, Jewel, and thank you all for coming out this evening. Thank you very much.
Testing. All right. Thank you, brother. Okay. All right. Good evening. We're already a little bit late, so I'll keep my introductory comments short. So I'm going to mention just three things that hopefully can orientate this conversation. Three things. I'm going to talk about assets, I'm going to talk about my work in mental health, and I'm going to talk about the brilliance of the ENC. Assets, my work in mental health, and the brilliance of the ENC. So assets, very small term, right? 6 words, but actually has an incredible impact. Why? Because on one level, if you don't know what that term means, it means that you have no orientation towards things like finances and wealth, okay? In my field, words also are important. They might be small. Words like triggers, words like coping, words like trauma. So what's the point? If you don't have any idea of what these words are, it just means that you don't have any relationship to that particular sort of topic. So in my work, in my field, you can use things like strength-based perspective. You could talk about solution therapy. The reality is that any good therapist, at the end of the day, our main job is to really figure out what is that one thing that's actually driving a person's sort of issues. What is that particular part of that person that actually might be the source of what their suffering or despair is? Is that part of their life, the part when they were an athlete, when all the things that they got in terms of their discipline and their success gave them some sense of confidence that over time may or may not be working for them? Is it that part of their life as when they were a parent, where now after years of raising children, they have some sense of regret, some sense of embarrassment or shame about some of the things that they did, even though they did it with good intentions? Or maybe that part of their life as a professional, when they're working very hard, and they actually find out that all the input and the things that they've done really didn't get the benefits that they thought that they would get. In either case, the reality is that these ideas about what is that one thing that actually drives us that's important is precisely why there's this brilliance of the ENC. What I mean, the reality is that the Urban League in general and the ENC in particular have always been sort of focused on issues of inequities and despair, right? That's not new. In fact, this Columbus Urban League's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Index is a good example about the ways in which we've always held corporate partners accountable, the way in which that Jerry's talking about. But the brilliance is that the ENC is saying that we cannot just hold these other folks, these external factors, to these standards when our own people may not necessarily understand them. How can our people, for example, hold other people accountable if we don't understand assets? How can we actually have some sort of sense of how we're doing as a family if we've not even had conversations about how much money are we saving? How much money do we need to actually live in sort of long-term care? How many of us have actually looked at a long-term care calculator, things like that? So the brilliance of the ENC and the brilliance of the work that we're doing is that these conversations are taking these important concepts and simply saying that from a health perspective, a community health perspective, that we cannot just hold these other external parties accountable without actually teaching our own people what these terms mean within the context of our lives. So with that being said, I'm always excited to be joined by this brilliant panel who can actually help us walk through these issues, trying to figure out whether or not wealth ends up meaning well-being is one of the ways in which we're going to have this conversation tonight. So at this time, please welcome the brilliant panel to the stage. So I've already been told to stay off the internet and not be directing a lot of my questions towards people's individual stories. But again, I can't thank everyone for this opportunity. So I think that we've been told to allow the panel to at least first introduce themselves. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves before we get into it. Left to right or right to left?
Okay. My name is Naima Porter, and I'm the owner of Concrete Dreamers. And the contribution to the panel that I have is I come from my expertise is in poverty. So I've grown up in poverty, I've studied poverty, and I'm also trained in a lot of poverty and able to facilitate different trainings in poverty. So I'm here to represent how to move from poverty to prosperity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Isaiah Williams. I have a nickname that I cannot get away from, which is Juice. This name has been with me since before I had Isaiah. I was a juicy baby. So for all the parents in the room, I was 13 pounds and 8 ounces at birth. Wow. Right? So I was a sack of potatoes, basically. All right, but I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised there. Had the opportunity to play football for a fellow Big Ten university who I won't mention. I'm sorry. So I had some experience here in Columbus a few times back in the day. I won't go into that. But I run a wealth management firm. I partnered with Northwestern Mutual, and my primary mission today is introducing as many people as we can to wealth. Right? What is generational wealth? How do we connect the dots to make sure that our families get, what we call generational wealth? So it's a bunch of different ways to do that, a ton of different opportunities out there to do that. And I'm more inclined to just introducing your scenario to how you get to the generational wealth. Excellent.
So good evening. My name is Stephanie Green. And first, I just want to thank the ENC and, of course, the Urban League for hosting us this evening. I am a managing director for Fifth Third Bank. What that means is we have a wealth management division with about $2 billion of assets under management. I have a team that is trying to execute on this mission of wealth building and protecting and growing every day. And what really I want, not just my legacy, but the organization I work for, the legacy to be is to help close that wealth gap with the African American community. So that's why I'm here today. I do have to say, I have a disclosure to make that the views I express here today are of my own and not of my organization. I can't help close the wealth gap for the community if they fire me in the morning. So.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Nelson. Before I go any further, I echo her sentiments. This is entirely all my opinions, not that of JP Morgan Chase. And I'm the newbie to the panel, and I assure you it is not because JP Morgan Chase sponsors this event, I assure you. I've been in banking for over 22 years. I worked at a regional bank in which the last 7 years I managed a commercial team. Moved to Columbus, Ohio, and started working for JP Morgan Chase about 16 months ago. It's been really good. I've learned that I love 3 of the 4 seasons. This is not the one that I'm necessarily endearing myself to. Columbus market executive for the commercial bank here, but my team that I work with, we also cover Southern Ohio, West Virginia, and Northern Kentucky. For me, what I've kind of learned over the years is just in general, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that puts us at a disadvantage in a lot of areas, one of which certainly is wealth building. So, I always say I was taught that you want to leave someplace better than you found it. And so my goal here is by the time I retire from this space, that hopefully I will have shared some of the things that I've learned over the years to help better others.
So it almost feels like we can go to the question and answers with all those good sort of introductions, so I appreciate it. So we're actually going to try to actually have an arc to this conversation, and so I'm going to actually start off with you because I'm extremely excited to have you walk through your sort of work. Back in the day when I was a young guy, especially when I was in graduate school, I used to always read about this concept called referring to African American youth as having high self-esteem but low self-efficacy. And the more and more I read, at some point it just dawned upon me that they were saying that black youth in particular were arrogant but ignorant. Okay? So for me, one of the questions, because I know your work focuses a lot on literacy, and so we don't have any sort of illusion that ignorance is bliss, but one of the things that I think that you have talked about quite often is that this lack of literacy sometimes translates into an orientation towards money and behaviors and how individuals and families end up being orientated. And so we might use the word hustling, okay? But for you, would you please just share a little bit about your thoughts about what are the consequences of lack of knowledge and what is its impact in terms of families and not just talking about young folks, but adults?
Oh, that's deep. It turns into what we deal with today, which is generational poverty. And there's a difference between generational poverty and situational poverty. So generational poverty is going to be my grandma was poor, my mother, and me, versus situational poverty means I might transition to middle class and have it that spirals me right back down into poverty. And for those of us who come from poverty, that isn't as hard as an event if you know how to navigate those systems. I think financial literacy is very hard in the Black community just because we have a historical relationship with wealth. We come from families where money isn't always there. We don't always have access to money. But then we also come from what we would call financial abuse and financial trauma. Correct. So we grow up in families where in childhood, to survive, you've had to put your child's name on a bill. And that later on, as a child, and you grow up and you try to get access to credit, you realize that, okay, my credit is already messed up, but not understanding that, it ended up that way because your family had to survive. You don't understand why bills are coming in your name as a child. We also come from families at times where the abuse looks a little different, where it could be like relationship abuse. So I'm not paying for this, or I'm not taking care of this unless you do this. That is financial abuse as well, where I'm holding this money or this pocketbook over your head. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, that's abusive. And then we also have situations where what was the third one? Money itself is used in a way where, and I'm gonna use the hustler word, we come from, we have romantic relationships, or we have families growing up where you give me $200 and I could flip this.
That's right.
And I could turn the 200 into 400 or 500. And because this sounds really good and you trust this person, this is your family, you love them, you go ahead and you risk that. That is very traumatic. So then when you're trying to make moves, or you're trying to learn about investment, and you're trying to grow, you really do carry this trauma with you of trust. Like, I don't really know how to trust people with my money, with my family. People I love done let me down with my money. And really, it's like, okay, that sounds good. I could flip the money, you know, and that's the same word we would use, like, but we do. We come from a long line of trauma, and it's very hard to trust somebody because my family did this and people I love did this, and now I'm being asked to trust a bank or an investor that I don't know. There are some barriers there, and I think that really limits us and how far we can grow. And that's our families, that's us as kids. And so I don't know how you break that cycle without some education. You have to develop that trust. You have to develop that bond to really get people to trust. Some of us, I mean, we carry that. We really carry that, and we don't know how it's going to end up. So just asking us to jump into something with our money is very scary. And I think to get over that barrier is going to require, again, financial literacy, and then building those relationships of trust amongst the community.
Excellent, excellent. And so I actually would just, one of the things I wanted to do differently is actually invite the panel to sort of engage in some of these questions I'm asking individually. The idea of hustling, does that apply in many ways to aspects of your work and how you see what it means to be taking less to do a lot more, particularly as African Americans in your spaces, or not?
You want to start this?
Sure. From that mentality in the line of work we do, it's not so much of a hustle, it's more the consistency around of doing something with something, right? So in a sense, it kind of alleviates the need for just active hustle, right? So now situations does come up where, I mean, out of the blue sky, we get COVID, right? That activates some level of a hustle, right? That activates some level of, let's figure this out from a financial standpoint. We do what we have to do, right, to stop the bleeding, but we're getting back to the systematic plan that we have in place, right? So as much as we can, we try to avoid scenarios where it will require you to hustle, right? But, you know, in the grand scheme of it is, I mean, because my personality has that in me, and I grew up having to hustle, being from Southside Chicago, right? I have no choice but to have that still spill over into some sort of client situation where we have to activate that level of go get it, right? But as much as we can, if we do this right, we try to avoid that scenario, because that's where we can sleep peacefully, right? We're not losing sleep because we're thinking about what is the next hustle tomorrow morning, right? What do I have to do next for my family to eat, right? So as much as we have not only a game plan, but a game plan with contingencies, just in case something happens, that avoids that active need to try to go in the hustle. So as much as we can, we try to avoid that.
Okay.
So what I would say is, I hear what Naima's saying, and I take what she says about trust and that lack of trust, and how do you change the mindset so that you can actually start to leverage your earnings and to build the wealth. And so one of the things I say to people is, yes, banks are scary. People tell me all the time, banks only want to lend money to people who don't need it. And what I say is, you're right, probably, but so that's why I say it's better to get it when you don't need it than to need it and can't get it. So and the way to do that is to establish relationships with, because the bank is just your banker. People know Brandon, they don't know JP Morgan. Nobody knows Jamie Dimon. Brandon don't know Jamie Dimon.
Actually, I do know Jamie.
We all know Jamie Dimon. But you know your banker, you don't know the bank.
Yeah.
So you build relationships with, with the person who is at your bank, and that's who you want to be your advocate. You have to help them understand your story and what it is you're trying to accomplish, and allow them to help you get there. So it does require some vulnerability and some trust, but the only way to earn that, to gain that trust, is to try to get to know that banker and not the bank, because that is a scary, I'm scared of the bank too. So, but if you just know that person within the bank, then that becomes a little less daunting, and it becomes more manageable, and becomes a way that you can kind of advance the trust and mitigate the hustle.
So I'd love to piggyback on several things that were said. I heard trust. I heard the hustle. What was the thing you said? Self-confidence versus self-efficacy, right? And I actually wish that we tend to show that more outside of the realms that we're typically used to applying those things, right? So, for example, if a white person comes to a bank and asks for a business loan, and you sit down with them and you go over their business plan and you mark it up and you tell them, sorry, I can't give you this business loan. That white person is going to go back to their drawing board, and they're going to work on that business plan, and they're going to go to another bank. A black person goes to a bank and they sit down with a banker and they get the same result. They're told, we can't help you. We walk out of there saying, see, my mama told me they weren't going to give me that loan. My grandparents told me they weren't going to give me that loan. And they may never walk into a bank again, right? But yet we persevere in so many other areas. And I would make the case that I actually wish that we saw more arrogance, I think is what you said, because I find that we self-select out of opportunities. We say, we know this outcome, so why even pursue it?
Yep.
And that's the problem that I have and wish we could get better at.
So I love that point, but here's where I think there's a wonderful sort of transition, because on one level, this language is nothing that we made up about flipping, right? So we know that there's an entire community that's extremely activated around the idea of making money. But the reality is it seems to be outside of these systems that we're talking about. So I'm going to actually transition to you, Mr. Williams. So imagine hypothetically, right, just hypothetically, a person does come from a background where they're not given a silver spoon and happens to sort of persevere and maybe has a career based upon their talent and discipline. But then at some point, actually has to, be involved in the world. And playing the game is something they've been doing, but now they actually have to figure out how to win in another aspect. So for you, I'm really curious, again, because you're trying to make this transition. So for my people who, there might be some barriers in terms of attitudes and stuff, but now they're actually in these systems. What does it actually take to win? What are the consequences of losing?
Sure. Well, I'll keep it quick. I mean, I want to talk for 2 hours on that. But a lot of what I do, at that point, you go from wealth management to family therapist, couples therapy, and all that other stuff that's kind of baked into that. But a lot of it is, first off, having some level of empathy to the situation, right? We all have emotional scars around financial institutions, right? For me, my mom saved in a Nike shoebox for the last 20 years until I got into this business and showed her what that should have looked like in the stock market. But those were emotional scars that she had working with financial institutions because of her past, sure, right? So it starts with that level of empathy to understand, like, hey, I know this exists, but this is how we move past that. This is how we start to go on a pathway to move beyond that, right? So a lot of times it's for them to understand and have the education around what is this stuff? How does this work? Like, how can I leverage this? What are the laws around taxes, or how does investments work, and like what is a stock, all those things. You break that down to a place where that they truly understand it. Not just the Google terms, but in a way that you really understand how this stuff works.
And I was maybe too hypothetical, because I'm actually interested in you. You were that person who made that transition. You were the person who had to, at some point, get into the game, step outside all this other stuff and step into a new realm. But the reality is there was no guarantee that you were actually going to succeed.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming there's competition. I'm assuming there takes some things to actually for you to be successful. So I'm interested in how you reflect on what has made you successful, how are you winning for yourself, and how do you see this winning for our community? Yeah. That's the thing that I'm interested in.
Yeah, so it starts with just belief and conviction first off, right? Okay. Really starting out with, why am I doing this in the first place? And my why was me having a sports background. I got tired of seeing kids that go from making $1,000 a month in college to $6 million in that bank account, but all of a sudden the next month they're taking out loans, right? I got tired of seeing that. So that curiosity got me to a place where I wanted to learn more. I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to start to help people. I got the relationships. I have a nickname that people can recognize. I can't get away from that, so let's leverage that, right? So it started with that level of curiosity, and then of course you're into a very white male older industry where I'm not necessarily the go-to for that, right? The number one question that I got when I first started out is, you throw a football, what do you know about stocks, right? And did I go and fold? Right, now I probably wanted to, right? But the hustle in me, or the ambitions and the perseverance in me, was starting to go beyond that. Well, I'll show you if you want to have a conversation, right? And that was always my approach to it. And in a sense, that's evolved and you get sharper over time. But for me, and just kind of seeing how my parents and how they grew up and the things that they would face, a lot of times I did see them tap out and love them to death, but I also saw what their lives looked like every time they stopped. And I didn't want that. And if anything, I wanted to reach back and start to do whatever I could to improve those situations. So when things were stacked against me, it's how do we get unique? How do we get creative? Right? How do we leverage everything that we have inside of us to make this work? And that's what I started to actively work on. And everything always went back to, where are my relationships? Like, what are the relationships that I have? Who can I communicate to? Who can I be vulnerable with? Say, I don't know this stuff.
Right.
I don't truly know how muni bonds work, right, for example, but I have a great system of folks who I can introduce you to until I catch up to speed, right? So that level of vulnerability, along with the empathy and the internal hustle and perseverance of myself, that allowed me to get to a point where I'll be doing this till I'm age 80, right? Because I am that motivated to see all of us, not just a few of us, but all of us have that level of peace in their life where they can lay their hair down at night, not worrying about how am I going to eat next week, right? What are my kids going to do when I retire, right? So I got another 45 years in me left, right? And that is, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'll be here doing it. God willing, I'm healthy and all those things, but the hustle and the perseverance in me is not going to stop right now.
Excellent. No, I love that, and it actually is a transition for the question that I have for you, Stephanie, and I promise not to bring up any Google stuff. But I actually had a friend, as a mentor, disclosed to me that he was, the first in the sort of banking industry, and at this particular point is still the only. So African Americans, unfortunately, have this reality where being the first and only forces us to recognize that there's an arc to this. In fact, we're like, 1960s, just very far away from the civil rights movement. So getting into the game, going from being outside to getting in and trying to figure out, is not the same thing as actually lasting or thriving. But when somebody looks at you, right, you have the impression that there's an arc to this, right? That there's something that has, there's a difference between the job and career, we get that. But what has it been for you that has made you last, that this whole idea of actually being there and being future-oriented for the long term has made you successful, and what are the challenges and opportunities for other people who really need to see the future in this area when it comes to wealth building?
So that's a great question. I am my least favorite topic, so I'm going to answer it reluctantly.
Okay.
Because that's been 34 years, right? So I've been at the bank. I started right out of college when I came back from Hampton, and I started as a teller, 4-year degree, Hampton University. I met some folks at a college fair, and they said, we'll be hiring for the management training program in 6 months. I had other job offers, but this is what I wanted to do, and I thought I was going to get the management training job in 6 months. So this is the job we have today. A lot of people would have had more pride. I think my parents would have wished I had more pride when I said, I'm taking this job at whatever, I don't know, it was like, 4 cents an hour versus what I was being offered. But I took it, and I didn't realize that the management training program, when it posted, they were going to hire one person. If they would have told me that, I may have had a different decision. But I was the one that they selected. Now, that happened to be, it took some risk as the first African-American management training program in the entire organization, not just here in Central Ohio. So sometimes ignorance is bliss. I was probably just too young and naive to be too scared to think that I couldn't do it. So, but honestly, when I posted, my manager said, when I was working as a teller, he said, they're not looking for people like you. And so I, again, probably just too stupid to realize that he's racist. And I just was like, well, of course they are. They told me this is. So I called the woman who had recruited me, and she said, you're exactly who we're looking for. Just send it in. We don't even need his signature. And so I always say to people, be someone's advocate, right? So advocate for somebody when they can't advocate for themselves. And that's one of my guiding principles today. So when you're in a position to help a person of color or people who don't have access, be that person for them. So I've been fortunate. I've been kind of naive probably, but I also work really hard to know that, look, I can do this, and I did. So one of the things that has been really, that is important to me, and it's not about me, it's what I can do for other people. So I tell people all the time, I'm a banker, but I was raised by a social worker and a healthcare person, so I'm used to watching people help, my parents help people. So I've just been fortunate to help people get houses, get their first jobs when in banking,
right.
Get business loans when I was doing business loans, because the only way we're going to close the wealth gap, so we have African Americans have the highest percentage of lower sophisticated type savings, so savings, like savings accounts.
Right.
But that's not where you're going to maximize your investment returns, particularly if you look over the last 10 years, there have been no returns in regular savings. So the only way we can do that is to help bridge the trust gap so that we can encourage people to do things that will help close the wealth gap more swiftly. And that is, we have to be sellers rather than buyers. And that means you have to have a business and a business loan so that you can sell your wares and not just purchase other people's. And we have to be able to be owners rather than renters. So when I spent 13 years in residential mortgage, helping people be homeowners and their first home loan, like when people stop you on the street, like, you gave me my first mortgage, and I'm like, I have no idea who you are. But that gives me gratitude, because that's how you do it. It's like one mortgage at a time. And the more people talk, and we need to shrink the difference between debt, which is what African Americans have. And we have huge purchasing power. We have $2 billion worth of purchasing power, which is the size of Italy and Canada. And so if we could, sorry.
Sure. No, I want us to get to that.
Trillion. I said billion. I meant trillion. You're right. I get stuck on my 2 billion, but it's trillion. But we have that kind of purchasing power, which is the size of countries. If you can leverage that, and and put it in the right kinds of debt, business debt, so that you're selling your wares, mortgage debt, so you're building your wealth. And as opposed to credit card debt or, your car. Yes, you want a decent car, but your car is going to be worth less than it is when you drive it off the lot. So again, just having those conversations is why you have these folks here to do it.
No. And so what I took from that, obviously, is this long career commitment and vision. And it transitions to this thing, though, that I want to get to Brandon about, because there's this famous scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy looks behind the curtain and sees this thing that's presumably is not the person in power. The reality is you deal with folks who are at an elevated level of stability, and I wonder, because we've talked about this idea of what does wealth and power really mean. At some point, folks just chilling when they actually get to this point. So looking behind the clothes, what do you see? What does it take actually to be in the position where all these other folks at some point presumably want to be, whether it be outside the system or inside the system? What does actually wealth and power look like in terms of
That's
how
fair.
you do it?
One of the things I think that we need to be clear about is, from my perspective, wealth does not equal freedom. Wealth equals options, which is great. And what I mean by that is Jeff Bezos, Amazon, right? Every day when Jeff Bezos wakes up, he's thinking about Amazon. When he goes to bed at night, he's thinking about Amazon. So he's not free. Now, he may be thinking about Amazon from a yacht on the coast of Europe, right? But he's not free. But what wealth does give you is the opportunity to be able to pivot. Wealth gives you the opportunity to be able to, if you don't like your current situation, you can do something else. For me, for example, one of the stories that I always kind of tell, because I live my life by this notion that tell me what you want and then tell me what you're willing to sacrifice. I'll give you a prime example, and I think I alluded to this. One of the things I think that's scary in our community is this phrase, you deserve, right? Because what will happen is let's say you're in the mall or you're looking at buying a car. You know you can't afford it. But if you don't tell yourself, you probably have a friend or family member who's going to say, but you work hard. You deserve it. And so you make that purchase, right? My wife, she deserved a great wedding. She is truly my better half. She is, she's a registered nurse. She helps people. When we were in our mid-20s, and she was my fiance at the time, we didn't have the bank of mom and dad to go to, right, for a wedding. So I told her, I said, we have enough money to have a great wedding or buy a house. I said, but I want to be very clear. I understand that it was always been your dream for the big wedding. So I will leave this decision entirely up to you with no judgment. She took a couple days and she said, I want a house. So we went to the Justice of the Peace, got married. We were in a house in less than 6 months where we got to raise our beautiful daughter in that house. To this day, we still own that house. It is almost free and clear, and it is a rental property that you regenerate income. How many people you know make money off of their wedding date? How many people you know had a great wedding and were divorced within 5 years? Keeping it 100.
You're not talking about anybody.
Keeping it 100.
You're not talking about anything that happens at all. You're just
right. No, I'm just assuming.
Stuff that you've heard, read about.
Okay. All hypothetical.
Yeah. Just
hypothetical.
Yeah.
No, statistics will tell you 50% of
Exactly.
everybody. And 100% of it's going to be dead. So you need to take care of what's right.
Yeah. Exactly. And so when you talk about behind the curtain, I want to let a secret out. If you all don't know this, if you go and apply for a business loan, you have to fill out a personal financial statement. You put all your assets on one side, you put all your liabilities on the other side. Guess what we ignore? The value of your car, the value of your jewelry, the value of your nice purses or expensive shoes. Furniture. All of those things, given, I'm going to say little to no credit. I personally say no credit whatsoever. Versus something like a home. So when Stephanie says that all debt isn't the same, your holiday vacation that you put on that credit card, you can't put that on the asset side of your balance sheet. But real estate, things of that nature can. The value of your business. So, when I try to advise people, it's just understanding, for one, as I said before, tell me what you want, then tell me what you're willing to sacrifice. You cannot separate the two.
Okay, excellent. We're actually running out of time, and actually want to, before we get to the questions, really just want to have the panelists actually just take, and this is where I do a little bit of therapy thing, and so to the extent to which we can disclose. So we're talking about wealth, right? And I'm interested, to the extent to which we've shared your own sort of arc towards this question, anything that you are personally working on towards wealth? What are the strategies that you are invested in, involved in, that give you this sort of sense of peace and purpose about the work that you're doing, to the extent to which you're willing to share? Start with you.
For me, I'm over here getting life from the panel. Again, I come from poverty, so being able to transition, I owned a home that was 3 units back home in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I lived in one of the units for free and got to rent out the other ones. It was it was a step in, like, I could never imagine a world where you could live rent-free. Like, that just didn't exist. And so to be very smart about that, but a life situation took me right back into situational poverty, and I had to sell the house and renters and everything, and like the trauma that I've talked about earlier. And I'm like, I could never buy again. I could never buy a house, and right now I'm actually looking, and like this is giving me life, like, you need to buy a house because rent right now is just going crazy. And I'm not gonna get none of that back. And when I sold that 3-unit, to walk away and be like, oh wow, you get a check? That was new. Like, oh, you get the money back you put into the house. That's new to people where I come from. We don't really understand. Like, buying a house seems like so daunting and so much, and something break, you gotta fix it. Not understanding what an asset is. And when you invest in this asset and you're ready to move on, or you don't want it anymore, or you want to buy another house and rent it out, understanding like this is wealth generating. And so just even having those type of aha moments really is exciting for me. So in the next year, I pray I could buy a home and be able to do that. And then understanding savings. I come from the same mindset where, I made this money legally and I earned it and nobody can take it from me. Yeah, and I don't want to, like, I'm looking at it and don't nobody own it. I can't take this from me. So I have a family member got 10,000. I got some family members that got 20,000. They're not putting it anywhere because it feels so good to have it. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I earned it. This is wealth. This is something happened, I could pay for it. Like, that's the mindset. But being able to understand and learn from you all and taking these classes and having a better understanding of where that money should go is where I'm going with my next steps. Like, I know it needs to go somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for me, me personally, I'm truly laser focused on building something that is far more superior than anything I can do in my lifetime. So something that will outlast me for the next 100, 200 years. And I found that thing within financial services, right? We do an amazing job with helping so many people, right? And I want that to continue on a massive scale long after like we're gone. I wish I can be immortal and live for the next 500 years, but the truth of the matter is we all got an expiration date, right? But at that expiration date, it shouldn't stop the wealth conversation. It shouldn't stop the next family from being set up and being in a place of peace where they want to be from a financial standpoint, right? Because we live in a very capitalist country, and it is what it is, right? And you talk about being able to play the game, that's the game you need to play right now.
Any specific games you're playing as it relates to wealth?
Anything in particular? Yeah, so simplest put, right, and I'll say as much as I can say because this is recorded, and if you want to know, you want to know more, we can talk one-on-one. But generically speaking, I try to make investments on things that I can necessarily predict, all right? So that first investment is something I know is going to happen. At some point, I will die. At some point, I will pass away. So my first investment is a life insurance policy, right? You monetize that.
Okay.
Right? We have that thing coming, and my kids will be very well taken care of because I know that thing is coming, right? And then also you start to look into different things like your home, right? We all need shelter, right? Make sure that I own my own property, right? So that became my second investment. There's some other things I do, stock market.
That's appreciated. No, this is actually right. So no, I love it.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. But that's the biggest thing.
No. These are right. These are specific things that we're sort of jewels that we're given. Long career. Any specific things that you are doing and have done to build wealth that you'd be willing to share or able to share?
So I think I shared this last time. First of all, I am old. Like, I'm like their mothers up here. So my mindset it's when most people would think my mindset would be different than what it was when I started at, I don't know, 22 or 3 at the bank. But the truth is, my mindset is very, very similar in that wealth building is not exciting. It's not sexy. It's not fancy. Anybody who owns Bitcoin out here will tell you the sexy stuff that sounds fancy, that you don't understand, you should not have any. So take whatever you were going to put in Bitcoin, put it in your 401k, your IRA, whatever. These are my opinions, not Fifth Third Bank's.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, you asked what I personally did when I had 2 kids in daycare. Their tuition was more than my mortgage. I maximized my 401k every day. We were broke. like super broke, like broke. And we always say we should have kept our first house where our SBA mortgage, where we had to borrow Eric Carmichael. People know Eric Carmichael. We had to get a bill of sale for a house to show that we had down payment. I mean, it was a hot mess. But that $700 mortgage that we paid, we were able to leverage it once the kids left the private school. We were able to leverage that sale of the house to another house, send our kids to schools where we didn't have $2,000 mortgage, and grow from there. And that has been the mindset ever since. So I've always maximized my 401k, not just to the match, but now to the maximum that you're able to get.
Okay, thank you.
So
No, I appreciate it.
no, so that's what I'm doing.
I'm assuming other people are going to ask you sort of questions related to it. For you as well.
I love how these private wealth people like all calm, like they're like their investment account. I stopped looking at my investment account in 401k for the last year, candidly.
100%.
So I always need them to kind of,
it,
exactly.
don't
so
look at it.
But I always need you all to reaffirm me of that, because my financial advisor, I call her on occasion to explain to me again why my money is in stocks. No, I kid. So I will start by saying, another phrase that really kind of frustrates me and I think kind of plagues our community is this thing, you can't take it with you. And yeah, you're right, but you know what? You can't leave it for your kids. And so for me, when I think about what kind of gave me joy, my parents, I will give them great credit that they always stressed education. Neither one of them went to college, but it was a complete understanding that I was going to go to college, no questions asked. But financially speaking, they're not going to have any assets to leave me. And so I did not want to repeat that. Right. So I own several investment properties. I have never used $1 of that for myself, because it is entirely for the benefit of my daughter. So when I think about wealth, candidly, I'm okay with working until retirement. Not gonna be 80. I can tell you that. Not gonna be 80.
Well, did you point
But
at me?
no,
Like
he said, no, no, not at all. Isaiah said he would work till 80. I don't plan on working till, not at all, not at all. I don't plan on working till 80, but I'm comfortable with the notion of putting in my hours till then. And so if I can walk away from this life positioning my daughter to actually be the bank of dad, right? Which a lot of us don't have, then that's success for me. And I'm very comfortable with living my life kind of vicariously through her happiness, positioning her. She's a senior at Howard. Shout out to HBCU. I had a lot of student loan debt. She gets to graduate with no student loan debt. So just continuing to progress and push it forward and making their lives better than ours. That should be the goal.
So I think this conversation around children, because this conversation has been about generational wealth. I think a deeper conversation around how we communicate and educate and prepare our children for wealth building, accumulating and building is really, really critical. So, and Brandon talked about a lot of those things, but I think that is where we have to go next, because again, we have a I don't want to say an obligation, but we have an opportunity to do this, because I see the people here in this audience, and you're in a different space, like you're poised and ready to do the next thing, and that's the next thing. But it's not just giving the kids what they want. Like, so again, it's helping them make the hard choices, and preparing them in a way that helps get them to that next level.
So maybe we're going to actually transition to question and answers now, but I love what you just pointed out. So this has been more of a focus on individual things and the extent to which our roles professionally, has lent itself to these sort of lessons and strategies and things. But certainly the role of the ENC is this idea that these are not just internal barriers, there's external barriers. And, disclaimers and all that stuff, and I know we can't. So perhaps in the question and answer, some of these questions will come up, because reality is there is a K through 12 education system, which presumably we should be learning this from. There are certain business partners that actually should be partnering with us to be dealing with some of these legacy issues. So you're 100% right. It shouldn't fall all on us as parents to figure out this whole question about legacy. but that's the reality and opportunity we have on one level. So at this particular time, we're going to open it up for a couple questions and answers. I think we're close to being on time. So were there questions that were actually already communicated or? Okay, I see somebody way back there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chiquila. Chiquila Barnhill. Mama had high ideas. Chiquila, yes.
All right.
So the question I have is, you're speaking a lot about 401k, and that is my soapbox. Because isn't that about working for 40 hours a week for about 40 years for about 40% of that 401k? Isn't that what a 401k is? See, I am into that other side of things where you go ahead and invest that money in the IRA. Now, what I do with my children is because I couldn't afford a home or a loan, not even from this microloan situation. So what I decided to do was put my 16-year-old on my credit card. That way, she can, by the time she's 18, me and her can get a house together. But the thing is, when she gets the 18 year, when she's 18, she might be able to get that 2-unit house 75% off, right? I'm sorry, I'm Black Girl Magic Master, and everything that y'all saying is wonderful, but I actually teach financial literacy classes at Martin Luther King Library. I literally teach on TikTok because you guys think it's too much for you. But what it is I teach finance in 15 seconds. I make finance sexy.
So, no, I love that. And so it sounds like, does the panel want to respond to that first question, whether or not perhaps that the 401k strategy, if I'm understanding, might be limiting in some...
I love it. First of all, thank you. I love your comment, and I'm glad somebody can make finance sexy, because I couldn't. Yes. So here's what I will say, though, is this is an and strategy. Like, there's more than one right answer, is what what I like to say to people. So not everybody has access to a 401k. And self-employed people, there are avenues for you as well. And I'll let the actual financial professional share that. But what I do say is, regardless of what that strategy is, whether it's a 401k or an IRA or Roth or whatever it is, you maximize that today. And I agree that you give kids an opportunity to show that they have the maturity under your umbrella to manage credit. And if they do, as a signer on your credit card, and at some point they evolve then to their own credit card, I think that helps establish credit. It helps them establish good credit, a good relationship with credit. So it's not like, oh, now I have credit, I'm gonna buy jeans and pizza, which is what I did in college. So because they now have had it, they know what is appropriate to use it for and how to pay it off. So I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm saying it is an and solution.
Do you mind me asking, and that's great. So the related question is whether or not, again, a lot of these things fall back on the individual. In your respective roles, do you see the role for K through 12 education in this space, particularly as a sort of its responsibility to communities of color? Does your institutions accept any responsibility for this education, this lack of literacy around these terms that we have? How do you actually think? How do you actually think about that in your respective spaces?
Yeah, so me personally, I believe that the K through 12 system absolutely need to introduce that as soon as possible, right? Because now a lot of what we do, and I love to do this, but it's kind of course correcting how some of this stuff works. Like, what are the laws, what are the rules around 401ks, IRAs, what's most applicable? So when you have access to that level of information, let's say by age 16, right? You're coming out as an 18-year-old, you can legally open a brokerage account by yourself now, and you know exactly what to do because you've had the experience, you've had the knowledge base already set in stone, right? Versus delay because you're not really sure how it works until you're 30 or 35, sometimes even 50, right? And that sort of time span, works against you. So
no,
as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, we have a young bankers program, and I personally spend time in the Columbus Public School System, which I am a proud graduate of, and I do think it's part of our responsibility to this community, and we want to have a financially strong and stable community in which we serve. But what I would also say, and this again is we cannot expect the institutions that built their wealth on our situation to solve our problems. So while, yes, we should participate, and we are actively, I think all of our organizations actively participate, that, again, that's not the solution. We have to come together and collaborate in a way that we can collectively solve our own problem, because nobody's going to solve it for us.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you. So my name is Ella Williams, and my question, well, first I want to make a statement, kind of just piggybacking on what's already been said, is that there is a lack of education. So for myself, coming from a foster care background and coming from an impoverished background as well, I find that as an adult, even though I've worked very hard to become educated and to get into a field where I make 6 figures and be able to manage my money and be able to buy my home, but now I'm in the position where I am also wanting to invest and then also wanting to expand my business. Where I find is that in our community, there seems to be a lack of transparency where, yes, you guys all speak about investments, but then you ask someone like, well, how did you do that? Or what can I do to do that? Who do I need to speak to? A lot of times people don't want to share that information. I feel like what can we do to, yes, K through 12 definitely has a lack of education, but how can we help people that have actually, fought certain obstacles to get to a position where they are ready to expand or scale or grow, help them arm them with the knowledge that's necessary for them to be able to get those loans, scale their businesses. And then also, my other question is, oftentimes when you go into entrepreneurship, I still work my very corporate job, and I find that people are like, oh, you should just take the leap and leave your job. And I worked very hard to establish security that I never had as a youth. So how do you tell someone, is there a way for me to just continue to do both and be able to continue to use that money for my corporate job? So sorry, that's it for my 2 questions.
So I'll speak to a couple of those things, and I'll speak kind of anecdotally. So when I decided to get into investment real estate, the reality is I'm a banker, and so I always kind of think about the downside. I like to feel like I know what I'm getting into. So one of the things that I did before I purchased real estate was I found a local real estate investment association. And I went there, and I think they met, I want to say once a month or twice a month, and I probably went there for a year and a half listening, meeting people, talking to them, asking questions, and finding the resources available. JP Morgan Chase has financial literacy in I think four centers around Columbus. So I think some of it is just upon us to find those resources, because a lot of times they actually are available, but if they don't knock on your door, then you have to do a little bit of legwork. And I think your second question, obviously if you listen to Steve Harvey, he says you step out, right? And everybody who's ever done something great has stepped out on a leap of faith, and that's fair, and it certainly worked for him. I would probably take the position of you let the outside business pull you from your main business, right? And so think about, a lot of times we don't recognize how many dead hours we have in a day, right? Hours that we're looking at sports or on social media, things of that nature. So first, I believe in controlling what you can control. So, look at yourself and say, are you really utilizing all of your hours? And I think you need to attack it doggedly if you want to get out of your job to build that side business, so you aren't stepping out on complete faith. You're being pulled, not stepping out on it. So that would be mine.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, there's a couple things that you can kind of think through that. I forgot who said it, but you don't necessarily fall in love with the bank, you fall in love with the banker, right? So this is all relationship based. Yes, I'm a licensed financial advisor, and there's thousands out there, but everyone operates a lot differently, right? So you want to find someone who matches your personality, who's want to hear your story. Tell me about your dreams, tell me about where you want to ultimately be, then we work backwards, right? Because your plan, your vision is for you, not mine for you, right? I can tell you to have this lavish lifestyle in the next 30 years, but that may or may not be what you want. Right, so you want to establish a relationship with someone at the institution that believes in what you want to get accomplished. From there, you set the course of, this is what I can do, this is what I have the capacity to do, I can be open and trustworthy and know exactly what's going on and why is it going on, all right? So for that piece of the puzzle. And then also what Brandon said, understanding the type of business owner or career path you want to have. There are some people that thrive in a situation of, I want to eat what I kill. Some people have an appetite for that, but some people thrive off of that. I'd be one of them, right? But there's also other people that's not necessarily geared to say, I wanted some level of security, right? Everything is based on what you want, right? So you working and talking with someone that can hear what you're telling them and they advise a plan based on what you want, that's the best course of action in my opinion.
Real quick question, just by a show of hands, how many folks here feel like they've had mentors or people that actually are advocating for them in their careers?
Financial mentors?
Financially, particularly, because I know this pattern. Okay. Right,
How many?
right, excellent. Okay.
How many of you know who have banking relationships with your bank? That's a great number.
How many of y'all got financial advisors? How many don't? How many don't have financial advisors? One,
Yeah.
two. Okay.
So that's important, and it is, so again, because every situation is different, and everybody's in a different place, and closing the wealth gap means different things to different people, so finding, relationships are magic, and so finding the right relationship, somebody that you know, like, and trust is really important, because again, you need to find somebody who meets your personality.
Absolutely.
Please.
So I was going to say, especially to your question, coming from, I got my foot in both worlds, so I'm the same way. Like, it was job security, being able to have a steady paycheck for every 2 weeks. I come from the trauma. I'm a little scared to just jump out here. And then also having my side business, which I actually do sell curriculum for youth around the financing, where we use Candy to teach them about money and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's both. So I am a huge advocate. I'm a millennial where we was writing checks in school and learning how to budget bank accounts and learning how to type, and a lot of those programs are gone. But one of the things I would, and not to say I'm a financial advisor at all, because Lord knows I'm learning. But I negotiated with my job to go part-time. So I still have access to a 401k. I work 3 days a week, and then I'm able to do my business and network. And so I'm like you, like that to me was levels. I need everything to be like there's levels to this. I need to baby step up out of here. And so that's one of the things I did was negotiate to go part-time and then also still do the business. So that's always that avenue as well. So if you're scared to kind of give a baby step.
How many more questions?
This one.
Where we at? One quick question?
She had her hand
She
up
had
for
her
a while.
hand up, yeah.
Yeah, she had her hand up for a while.
Which one?
Yeah,
Over
he
there?
did me too. He did too.
I'm trying to be patient with you guys, but I came here to warn you.
Remember that.
All right, and I appreciate that you did touch on something just now about us solving our own problems. All right. Number one, the United States economy is falling. And I believe a lot of people don't realize that. So I invite you to look at a YouTube channel. It's called Economic Ninja. They just put out an article called Things Fall Apart. Check that out tonight so you can be brought up to speed on what's happening with your dollar. Now, number one, I'd like to ask you this. Our great-grandparents knew that the key to freedom was ownership. That's why they started Black Wall Street, because they knew as children of people who were free from slavery that you had to own something in order to be free. Now, what I want to ask you is this. Is it time for our people to stop looking toward other communities and build our own financial institutions so that we can insulate ourselves from other communities' economic downturns?
Thank you for the question. Anybody want to respond to that before? Okay.
Yeah, we had an extensive conversation before we started this, so I know exactly where you're coming from. But I mean, we share the same thoughts. Control what you can control, right? So for me, there's no one, and I'll keep it light. Let's just talk about health for a second. Like, all right, you have an event coming up in 6 months, so you want to drop 20 pounds. There's no magical formula that's going to show up at your doorstep. Here's how you drop 25 pounds, right? It's really simple stuff. Do something about it, right? Whether that be in the gym, hire a personal trainer, whatever it might be, right? But whatever it is, take control of what that is. So that might be starting your own financial institutions or getting a small group of folks and doing group economics to start something. Because like you said, I'm not expecting any sort of savior to come along with this. And then this is exactly why, like myself and the team, would do what we do, because we try to push this as much as we can to help people. but for the most part, no one is knocking on your door telling you how to do this, right? So you taking action and taking matters into your own hand,
right.
I think that starts it, right?
That's
and then
it.
you just never know what happens, how that evolves.
Amen.
So it sounds,
I thought
well,
it
at
was
least
good.
the answer that he was willing to give.
This young lady
Sure.
is right.
Vangela?
had her-
One last,
Just, yeah, this young lady.
Another question over here, Shonda.
Right here.
we just got one more.
This one young lady.
We're running
right
out of time.
here.
Vangela?
We got about 10, we got about
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Vangela Barnes, and I'm the chair for the Greater Southeast Area Commission. One of the things that you touched on, or you've been talking a lot about, is ownership of property. I just want to, it's not really necessarily a question, it's just a comment. I just want to make everybody aware that the City of Columbus is doing a zone-in to look at rezoning, looking at all the rezoning laws in the City of Columbus, because they haven't been looked at since 1950. And if you want to go look at the exhibit, it's at Barnett Rec Center. It will talk about how we were redlined, how our property was taken away from us, how the well, a lot of us know about the interstate and how it went through our city. It's done this in a lot of other cities. I worked for Chase myself for almost 20 years, and I was an IT person. I worked on a lot of the code around how we did ownership of property and mortgages. And I can't really disclose a lot of things that I learned, but what I'm just saying is it's all underlining. It is what we are saying about how it's done at the institutional level, and it's affected our families, our heritage, our ownership, and why we never could own at some particular point when 90% of the mortgages were given out to only white people. This is all displayed and talked about in the exhibit that you'll see at Barnett. But they're looking for community involvement. So they want your opinions, they want your information, they want to know how can they change the zoning laws in Columbus to fit where you live. It may not be the same across the city, every area of the city is different, but they want to get your input. So this is where it starts. We can listen to the panel, we can listen to how you can become owners, but you have to go to these things and provide your input and become a part of the decisions as they're being made.
All right, thank you. That last one? Yes.
To this gentleman. So, guys, we need you to ask a question, okay? Okay. We done had the master class up here. Y'all know me. Y'all already know me. So.
Does she?
Hey, so I got an actual question, but
They like that.
oh, she got it.
No, she was the last one. She's going to be last.
You go ahead.
She got it. I mean, is that okay? I mean, Miss.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have an actual question. I just want to say that financial literacy is your opinion of it. So, and everybody have to accept that from everybody. But my question is, so I do real estate investment, and the problem is, you talk about getting that banker or someone. How do you get past the person that can't make the actual decision? So that's the problem in a lot of situations. Yeah, you go talk to a banker. He has empathy for you. He can talk to you about how you feel, what you need to do, this and that, but he can't make the decision. How do you get past that point? Because that's the problem that a lot of people face when they're trying to do business with banks. Yeah. So I just want your opinion on that, guys.
So first of all, it's not always a he who's making a decision. I'm totally kidding. I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying. Yeah. So look, sometimes I don't know, no matter where you go, there are levels. And so, again, that's why establishing a relationship, I mean, you're not going to be able to walk into the credit officers aren't going to come meet with you. That's just not going to happen. So what we have to do then is you have to create a relationship with those people that have to deal with those credit people and help work with them to create a compelling story, a compelling financial package, a compelling financial statement or projections or, forecasts so that they can advocate on your behalf, because that's what they're hired to do. So, and find somebody who's willing and eager to do that, because that's what we do. I mean, that's what we're hired to do.
That's fair. And I'll piggyback off of that. And I go back to it. Look, I think no one up here, I think very few people probably in the audience are going to sit here and say that the system has been historically fair. There's statistics that have disproven that. Jamie Dimon has spoken to that. There's no doubt about it. But what I will also say is sometimes we have this tendency to kind of, once again, kind of focus on the other, not ourselves. I can tell you, I've been in decision-making positions where people come to me and you want something, you have no business plan, you can't ask for simple questions. So instead of necessarily assuming that it's the fact that you're not in front of the quote-unquote decision maker is an issue, at least make sure that you are doing everything and presenting the right information. So therefore, because here's what I always say. The reality is that when we are outside of the bank talking to clients, we are advocate for the bank. When we are inside the bank talking to decision makers, et cetera, we are advocate for our clients.
That's right.
But you have to give us the tools to do that. We can't go to whomever he or she that's the credit officer and say, but I really like Johnny. I really do. Like, yeah, his personal financial statement sucks. He didn't have a business plan. He just knows that he wants to get into real estate. That's not going to fly. So work on making sure that you have the right package. And I go back to it. There's resources out there that can help.
The Urban League. The resources that the Urban League provides, and this is a shameless plug for Stephanie and her team, they're doing amazing things.
You're a board member.
It's a shameless board member plug. Brandon and I both.
You're a board member.
But the truth of the matter is, even as a board member, I go to board meetings and the programming committee, they present, and I'm like, you have to be kidding me. Like, this is amazing. We need to tell this story. This community needs to understand the level of really, really impressive resources that are available at your Columbus Urban League. And that is, that's true talk right there.
The one last thing that I actually want to make to this point, though, and Brandon, I hope you don't mind me sort of revealing, though, is that one of the things that you were kind enough to share with me is while there is this reality that folks have to, be able to articulate the reasons for their decisions, there is no quote-unquote science. And one of the things you talked about is the sort of awareness that if you're going to be in this game, that part of the opportunity is to build relationships with people before you actually have to make decisions.
Yes.
So, for example, if you have a high school students, hopefully one of the things you're telling them is that before you graduate, somebody's going to have to write a letter of recommendation. So you have to build relationships with teachers and people so that they can actually say something about you. And so that piece that if you don't mind, I'm saying, so to the extent to which you go be in this game, and you've been kind, there's just certain things you got to do. And I think that that's what you're saying. If you go be in this game, you got to actually, do certain things. And so not just showing up at the moment where a decision has to be made, but really doing that sort of work in advance, I think,
that's right.
is part of what...
Thank you, Jules, so much, because I did want to circle back with that, so I appreciate you. Because I don't want to say, to be very clear, if you do know Johnny, and if you've known Johnny over the course of years, every time we go and present a credit or a loan to the people, our reputation is on the line as well because we're vouching for you. Yeah. So to be very clear, that definitely plays a role. And Jules said it best. Try to present that relationship, start that relationship, cultivate that relationship before you actually have to ask. So I can say, look, I've been following Johnny for 5 years.
We've been
working this, exactly. He's going back to the drawing board. He's fine-tuned some things. He's gone to the investment real estate associations. He's gotten sharp. He has his contractor group. His numbers look solid. Now I can go with all of that and say, and oh, by the way, I really like Johnny.
Yeah. Thank you.
One last question.
Yep.
Madam.
Thank you, President Hightower.
My name is Ann Valentine. I'm here representing UARC, and my question is, earlier in this series, you had mentioned that you took out a life insurance policy, something of that nature, and my question is, why did you take out a life insurance policy? The reason is that when black folks take out a life insurance policy, It's some ungodly, unrealistic amount. And every senior, I bet you in this city, except maybe for me, I don't believe in life insurance policies. If I'm going to put that money in something, I'm going to either put it in a savings account that gives me hardly nothing versus a policy that you get to cash in when I'm dead. And that's if my kids can find it. So the question is, why do you have a life insurance policy?
I want to answer. I'm going to go ahead and take the privilege on this and answer this question.
Got it.
My parents died year before last, 2 weeks apart after 64 years of marriage. And my dad had 5 life insurance policies. Me and my brother got nice chunks of change. All right? That's why that insurance policy is important. And that was back in the day when they didn't have wealth building opportunities, but he had real estate, and he had life insurance policies, and he had 2 retirements from the military and from a corporation. So while you may not, and I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier, what Isaiah was saying, this ain't about you. This is about your kids. This is about your grandkids. So in this instance, in our family, me and my brother were the beneficiaries of those life insurance policies that he had started. One of them we found he started before he and my mother were married when he was in the Navy, when he was 19 years old, right? And they still had to pay that out to us when it came back, and he had put it, because he had put it in my grandfather's name, and it was something that was still going to my grandparents' house, and they've been dead for forever. But anyway, but I'm just sharing. That's why I wanted to take the privilege of that. So don't discount. It's about what kind of policies you're taking out, right? You got to know what you're taking out. But this is an instance where we're talking about 60-something years ago, and for me and my brother, and then for their grandchildren, they were the beneficiaries of that insurance, post-insurance policies. So I'm just sharing, that's my personal. Let me go ahead and close. What's that?
I'm sorry.
What?
I just said one thing. I don't have the mic.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Please, I'm going to share. I just think we need to make sure that we teach our young folks about taxes and interest. Because those are key as far as how you make money and how you keep money. But I'm not looking at you, I'm just saying we don't always talk about that interest rate and, so that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Compounding interest.
It's called, Jerry, they said compounding interest.
Compounding interest.
Compounding interest.
Compounding interest. If you learn nothing else, Google compounding interest and follow that.
So, let me, let's give our master class panelists a round of applause. This for me again is truly a master class, and just for those of you who are either watching online, and then we will repost again. The last time, I think we had more people who watched the repost than we had people here, which was really incredible because we kept getting comments, and that was one of the reasons why they said we wanted to do it again, because this truly is a master class. And so thank you for the nuggets that you dropped. I'm like Naima, I'm sitting here still learning as everybody else is here. I'm mad because my 32-year-old should have been in here. I should have hit him in the head and made him come up in here tonight. We need to make sure that those of us who are working in this business, I'm just gonna keep it real, we already got Naima, we already got her on contract. You know what I'm saying? She on contract. Because what the nuggets that she's bringing and the people that we are serving, they need to hear those. They need to hear those kind of nuggets. Very much so. That they actually need to understand the difference from generational poverty to situational poverty. Then on the other hand, then we have our young people, our young professionals, right? Who we still have people who come to home buyer education, right? 2 couples making 6 figures and they don't know how to buy a house. You see, so for black folks, we got the full spectrum of our community that we still need to be educating about what wealth building is. And the reality is, we're so used to, and we're going to start next year talking differently, all we always want to talk about is being poor, right? We always talk about is poor, what we ain't got, what we doing. That's why we're having these classes. This is about wealth building. We can be wealthy as well. We just have to figure out how to do it, and having master classes like this is how we do it. Let me say again, on behalf of our sponsors, another round of applause for JP Morgan Chase. They believed in this work in the ENC, having these forums. Jewel, as always, you are a master when it comes to hosting. And just having an outstanding panel. And so I'm sure, you know, we're gonna put this online now. This is the master class tonight. And we're gonna encourage people to continue to come and to view this. And we're gonna continue this conversation next year. We're going to have a significant wealth building conference in the city of Columbus. We are bringing in these folks as well as other national speakers because we gotta keep having this conversation. It's not a one time, it's not a once a month, it's about the education of our community and making sure that we understand what real wealth building really needs to look like and be like, and that we can actually obtain it, right? And that you have examples of people who can actually show you how to do it. Right, and they have the lived experiences on both sides to do it. So, thank you again for. Trey, you're gonna make me do my work tonight, right? We do have, and so as a part of in February, that's what I was talking a little bit about. The language that we talk about when we talk about the black community, we're always talking about poor. We're always talking about negative, right? And really, what we're doing, guys, is we're sabotaging equity. Because we're not talking about what the aspirations of our children are. We're not talking about the aspirations of our families. We're always talking about the negatives. We're highlighting the negatives. And so Travian Shorters is a social entrepreneur, and he's been quarterbacking a national movement that, as he says, first defines black people by their aspirations and their contributions first. Then, based on those assets, he says, we can then secure fundamental freedoms to live, own, vote, and excel. And so for Black History Month, we will be bringing him in for ENC on February 7th. I'm telling you now, when you hear this brother, he's going to change your life. What he's talking about is transformational. And so we hope to see everybody here. Those of you that are online, we ain't doing it online no more. You got to come be in person next time around. February 7th. For ENC Live. Thank you. Have a good evening.